Today I've got a super exciting teaching to bring to you, something that I've never heard anyone else teach like this. I think it's something that's going to change your understanding of the end time timeline. We're going to decode Matthew 24 and show you without doubt that you'll know the day that we are living in. Many people out there have been confused by Matthew 24 and they mumble jumble it up. And today I'm going to decode it for you. All right, so let's look at Matthew 24. So we had Jesus departing from the temple, and the disciples come up to him and say how wonderful the buildings are. And Jesus says, do you see all these things? Assuredly not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. And then the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us when these things will be. What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, I've color-coded things here for you, all right? So, when will the temple be destroyed? I've put the stuff in green. And then it says, what will be the sign of your coming? Now, Jesus comes to destroy the temple. Okay, so he's a part of the destruction of the temple, even though he uses the Romans to do it, but it also comes at the end of the age. So I've put anything that could be towards both events, I've put it in yellow, all right? So in purple, it's the end of the age. That's the end of the age that we're living in now. And in green, it was the end of the temple age and of Jerusalem. All right? This is the old covenant age. All right, so if we read down in yellow there, you can see all the things that I'm not going to read out again, all the signs. But then in verse 15 it says, but therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and woe to those who are pregnant, to those who are nursing babies. And then there will be great tribulation, such as not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. See, I've told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, here's in the desert, do not go out, or look, here's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. So what Jesus is saying here, now I've skipped a little bit just for time, all right, to speed things up for you guys. I'm only reading the highlighted bits. But what Jesus is saying here is that when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, flee to the mountains out of the city, but this is not the coming of the Son of Man. This is not. So if anyone says, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it, because that is not his coming to earth. Okay, now he might be up in the clouds, allowing the judgment to come upon Jerusalem, but he is not coming to this earth. So don't believe that he'll be found here on the earth. Does that make sense? All right, so that is the abomination of desolation, and we're going to go into that in a bit more detail soon. Now, this is a key point. He's saying that this is not his second coming, but the sign of his second coming will be, like in verse 27, will be like lightning that comes from the east and flashes to the west. This will be the coming of the Son of Man. And it says, for wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Now, that is the key verse that you need to understand when you're looking at the end of the age. Okay? For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered. This is where you will see, or when you will see, Christ coming like a flash of lightning from the east to the west. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this up against Luke 21, which is also covering the same events. So again, in green, that's everything to do with the abomination of desolation. So if we look at Luke 21 up on the left, you can see there that he has the same things. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. And it goes, but woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. For there will be a great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So do you see here, same event, slightly described differently. It says that when it falls, this is the abomination of desolation, and Jerusalem falls, they'll fall by the edge of the sword, they'll be led away into captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So can you see here, this is not the end of the age, because why? There has to be the time of the Gentiles. And then it goes on to talk about when the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled, you've got these signs of the coming of the Son of Man. So can you see how we can measure both these together, the purple and the green, and see how these two separate events are shown in these scriptures? One is the abomination of desolation, which happened in 70 AD, and now the end of the times of the Gentiles, which is when the carcass and the eagles are gathered. And I'm going to show you soon what that means. All right. But just to finish this little bit here, we're going to look in blue where it says, where both of Luke and Matthew says, look at the fig tree, learn this parable. When you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors, and this generation will by no means pass till all these things take place. So, the fig tree points to the abomination of desolation and the events which will happen there in one generation, which is the generation Jesus was talking to. And then you've got our generation, the end of the Gentiles, where we will see the end of time, the end of this age, with this coming of the Son of Man and the carcass and the eagles gathering around. All right. So you've got to learn to look at the different signs, and that is what the fig tree is saying. There's signs to the abomination of desolation and signs to the end. So let's look at this carcass where the eagles are gathered. So we're going to look at both Revelation 19 and Ezekiel 39. They both mention the coming of the Son of Man. All right, and it says in that day there will be a great slaughter, and this slaughter is of the armies surrounding Jerusalem or coming against Jesus. All right, and at this time, let's look at Ezekiel 39:17. It says, speak to every sort of bird and to every beast of the field. Assemble yourselves and come and gather together from all sides to my sacrificial meal, where I am sacrificing for you. A great sacrificial meal on the mountains of Israel, that you may eat flesh and drink blood, that you shall eat the flesh of the mighty. You see how this is the Matthew 24, verse 27 and 28, the carcass and the eagles gathering together. So in Revelation 18 and 19, or 17 and 18, says, come and gather together for the supper of the great God, that you may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of captains and the flesh of the mighty men. And then in verse 19 it says, and I saw the beast, the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. So this is the gathering of the sacrificial meal which we are to look for the end of our age, the time of the Gentiles. And again, it's different to the abomination of desolation. So let's look at the abomination of desolation. So in 66 AD, after Jesus had gone and the disciples were doing their work, there was actually this Roman governor, Florus, and he seized 17 talents from the Jewish temple's treasury as like a tax on the Jewish temple. And this started the major war where 3.5 years later, 70 AD, the temple was destroyed. This is the abomination of desolation, the destruction of the temple, and then the setting up of the abomination of the Gentiles who would trample the Temple Mount in the great city of Jerusalem. So this is what the abomination of desolation is. Now in Daniel 12, verse 9, it talks of 1,290 days from when this daily sacrifice, or you could say it's the daily offerings, is taken away, and the abomination of desolation happens, or is appointed, or is allowed. That's set up, which is this 5414, which can mean appointed. So between these two events, the daily offerings is taken away, and the abomination of desolation occurs, or is appointed. There will be 1,290 days, so 3.5 years. And then it says, blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. If you add those two together, it's 7 years. All right. And the last stand of the Jewish-Roman war was in 73 CE, which was the fall of Masada that you can read in there as well. And this was the 7-year war that we can look at here. So you can see how this war can fulfill Daniel 12. Now, if we look at Daniel 9:26, also talking about the abomination of desolation and the 70 weeks that are given to Jerusalem, to the people, to the Jews. I'm going to pick it up in verse 26, and it says, after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. So that's Jesus, okay? He gets cut off after the 62-week period, which are allocated to the people of God. And then it says, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of it shall be with a flood. Then it says, until the end of the war, desolations are determined. So that's a 7-year war of desolations, right? That is determined. But then it says, he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Now, this is a contentious spot. Some people think there's going to be a peace treaty, or that there should have been a treaty in around the time of this abomination of desolation, and in the middle of that treaty, the temple would get destroyed. As far as we can see, other than this sacrifice being taken away, the offerings being taken out of the temple, nothing we can see was a treaty or a covenant that took place at that time. So I believe that this is more likely speaking of the covenant that Jesus has set up with his people. Now, Jesus' covenant, we can see it as a covenant of 7 appointed days, a period of 7. 1 week. So that 1 week is the word Shabua, which can mean a period of 7, all right, or 7 appointed days. So these 7 appointed days, I'm going to put to you that it could be the 7 main feasts, the Jewish feasts. Now, we can split these up into spring feasts and fall feasts. Now, the spring feasts were fulfilled following Jesus' crucifixion and on Pentecost. All right, there are 4 feasts that were fulfilled. Now, so how does he confirm this covenant? First, he sacrifices his life. It's a blood covenant. Christ sacrifices his life. And then he allows the temple to be destroyed in judgment because they did not know the day of their coming. Therefore, the temple would be destroyed. And he allowed this to happen in 70 AD. So this confirms his covenant in blood that he would take away the daily sacrifices and offerings. You don't need that anymore. He fulfilled it. So the temple would be destroyed, and all that would be left now is a final 3.5 years, the final half of the week, which is the fall feasts, which is the time of his second coming. So we can split up the 7 Jewish feasts into 2. And Jesus came in the middle of it and fulfilled it, splitting up the spring feast and the fall feasts. The fall feast will be fulfilled when he comes again. So can you see how this all comes together? And you can split up the Abomination of Desolation event to the end time event. So this end time, is it called in the Bible times, and half a time, or 42 months. It's the 42 months that is given over to the beast in Revelation 9. And yeah, so it's either talked about as times and half a time, or 42 months. Now this is just an allocated period of time that is not literal. So there is no temple in the New Testament once that the Jewish second temple was destroyed. And there's no temple other than a heavenly temple and a New Jerusalem temple, which comes out of heaven. That's the only time that another temple is described in the New Testament. The book of Ezekiel talks about a temple after Jesus returns. Now, when Jesus returns, if there is a physical temple after that, the Ezekiel 40 temple, if there is a temple there, then that's fine. It doesn't matter. It does not change this teaching. Now, people look to Revelation 11 and they say, look, I see a temple. So let's look at it. Revelation 11. So John was given a reed, like a measuring rod, and the angel said to him, rise and measure the temple of God, the altar and those who worship there. Look, a temple. And he says, leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. Now, 42 months. That's what I'm telling you. It's the time period given to the time of the Gentiles, the Abomination of Desolation, where the people of the Gentiles tread the holy city underfoot. And it's allocated 42 months, or a time times and half a time, which is the last section of that prophecy of Daniel. Now, how do I know that this is not a physical temple that we're talking about in Revelation 11? Now let Scripture speak for itself. Let's go to verse 19. It says, "Then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. There were lightnings, noises, thunderings, and earthquake, and great hail." So can you see here that the temple was opened in heaven? It wasn't an earthly temple. All right. And in verse 16 it says, "There were 24 elders who sat before God on the throne. They fell on their faces and worshipped God." So this was John measuring the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. Nothing earthly about it. But he says the outside, the outer court, is the holy city, which is tread underfoot for the time of the Gentiles, 42 months. Then it also goes on to say he gives power to his 2 witnesses, and they prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now, 1,260 days is roughly 3.5 years, or time times and half a time. Now, these 2 witnesses, they get the same amount of time, basically, as the time of the Gentiles. However, it is slightly short of the time of the Gentiles. Why? Because it says here, they are resurrected to heaven. They lose their life. The beast that ascends from the bottomless pit in verse 7 makes war against them, overcomes them and kills them. But then they are resurrected with the breath of life up into heaven. So what does this mean? Now we can look at Romans 11, and we can see here that Paul is describing believers as the olive tree, the branches of the olive tree. The Jewish believers are natural branches, and us Gentiles are wild branches that are grafted in. And that's who the olive tree is. So if we go back to Revelation 11, it says that the 2 witnesses are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands standing before the God of the earth. So the olive trees, 2 of them, the Gentiles and the Jewish people. Right? The olive trees. And then the lampstands, what is that? Well, if you look at Revelation 1 verse 20, it says the 7 lampstands which you saw are the 7 churches. So lampstands are the church, the Christian believers, all right, which could be Jewish or Gentile. So it's the same thing. 2 witnesses of the olive tree and the lampstands. This is who the 2 witnesses are. And it is true that a great destruction is coming, which is going to leave Jerusalem destroyed. The book of Zechariah says 2/3 of the city will fall. And the Christian world is also coming under a major destruction about to happen. Now, we call this destruction the destruction of Mystery Babylon the Great. Now, what we have to realize about Greater Israel, Jerusalem, and the Christian world, where our names are in God, okay, we are harlots. Both of us have fallen from our calling. En masse, we are harlots and adulterers, and we sleep with the world. In fact, we're often more worldly than our enemies. This is the Mystery Babylon judgment that is coming to this world at the time of the end, about to happen right now. So here in Revelation 17, it says, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." It goes down, Mystery Babylon the Great. But it says that here in verse 12 that there are 10 kings who do not have any kingdom yet, but they will receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast being the international order who controls the world. These will make war with the Lamb and will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. So these 10 kings are also the 10 kings which are on the beast, who hate the harlot of Mystery Babylon, and they make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So there's 10 kings that are going to destroy Mystery Babylon at the end of this age. And then they will make war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. And that's at this great carcass, eagles gathering feast of the supper of the Lord. But when the great harlot is destroyed, that's symbolic for the 2 witnesses being destroyed, or the 2 witnesses are symbolic for those, the Jewish power and the Christian world power being destroyed, Mystery Babylon, at this end time event. And then when this happens, Jesus will return with his armies from heaven at Jerusalem. The 10 kings will come against him with their armies, and Jesus will judge the nations. So let's look at Joel 3 here. It talks of the same thing. It says, "For behold, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem." So that's what happened, hasn't it? He's brought them back to Jerusalem and to his land. But he will also gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's where Jehovah judges, all right? That's what it means. "And I will enter into judgment with them there. On account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations." But he's brought many of them back, despite their evil. All right. So I'm not saying that Israel is perfect. I'm not saying everything they do is perfect, nor the Christian world. But then it goes on, let's read the yellow. It says, "Proclaim this among the nations, prepare for war. Assemble and come, all you nations, and gather together all around. Come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will judge all the surrounding nations." Now there's another key event that happens at the end of this age, and it's shown right here in Revelation 17 verse 19. It says, "Now the great city was divided into 3 parts." Now if you look into the Greek, it's the word there, genomal, or however you say it, and it says to become. So the great city will be made to happen, to become, to being divided up into 3 parts. So this is not because of an earthquake, right? This is the people gathering to make to happen that the city would be divided into 3 parts. So there'll be an Israeli part, a Palestinian part, and a joint part. Probably the Temple Mount, which would be a neutral spot where both can access and no one has control over. So that's the agreement they're trying to get over Jerusalem. But if you look back into Joel 3, where in the same color I've highlighted, it says they have also divided up my land. So they're looking to divide this land of Israel into a Palestinian state and an Israeli state. So that is after he has brought them back from Judah and Jerusalem, his people, his heritage Israel. So this Joel 3 prophecy is occurring right now. The Revelation 16:19 prophecy is occurring right now. This is the key. When you see this happening, that's when this is the generation. When we see these things, it will all come to pass. The cities of the nations will fall. Great Babylon will be remembered to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. This is going to happen when they're trying to divide God's land up into two, including Jerusalem into three. Now, we can look right now, in the 9th of September, only in a few days, the United Nations are gathering to make this happen. Now, the scripture doesn't actually say they fully get to actually do it. They go to do it. Even if they have an agreement to some extent, it does not happen. All right? The reason it doesn't happen is because when they come up, the 10 kings, after destroying Mystery Babylon, they come up to enforce this division, and that's when Jesus returns and destroys them all with his people, with his chosen, his faithful ones. So I talked about the two witnesses being destroyed. Now, as much as they get destroyed, the chosen and faithful ones of the witnesses, they get resurrected after 3.5 days following this great destruction that takes place. And this is the event we call the Great Resurrection or the Rapture. Now, I'm going to speculate some dates here, all right? Now, the reason I'm doing this is because of the signs that we are seeing. If it comes and goes, it's not right. But we are allowed to look and speculate and hope for the coming of our Lord. So on the right here, you can see under the key dates of this year, we've got the General Assembly happening to divide up the land. Great Babylon and the nations, I believe, are going to be destroyed around the 19th of September this year. Now, I believe this because I was shown a great visitation by an angel of the Lord that took me through future, through time, through the ether, and I saw it. He showed me the destruction, and later on, he came to me in a voice and gave me a time frame which finishes on the 19th of September. So either the great destruction happens on that date or something happens to make this great destruction occur on this 19th of September date, which would leave the Feast of Trumpets a few days later, on between the 22nd and the 24th of September. And it's during this Feast of Trumpets where the great resurrection, rapture, may occur. I'm not saying it will occur because I don't know. But if these things line up, then it could occur on that date. And then following that, when the 10 kings will come to try and divide up the city by force, in fact, they'll probably just try to take over it fully. And that's when Jesus returns, judging them. And it could happen on the Feast of Tabernacles. So these last three feasts, the Feast of Trumpets, the Atonement, and the Tabernacles all occur in a quick succession. And that's why I believe we have a quick finish to the end of this age. I don't believe we have to wait 3.5 years or 7 years. I could be wrong. In my view, 42 months and 3.5 years is just the full time of the Gentiles. And that's the time prophetically given to the times of the Gentiles until they're fulfilled. And there's nothing literal about it. It's a figurative time frame. And just as the first feasts, the spring feasts, just as they were all fulfilled one after another, after Jesus' crucifixion, and then each feast occurred straight away afterwards, there's every possibility that the fall feast will happen in the same way, and we won't have to wait 7 year time. Now, I know that there's good people out there who may have heard from God to some extent say that there's a 7 year time period, even for these fall feasts to be fulfilled. Nobody knows for sure how this is going to take place. All we can do is read the scripture and see if what we believe is lining up with the scripture. Nowhere is there a temple, guys, so there's no need for 7 years. Let's look at this temple thing just a little bit longer. 1 Corinthians 3:16, it says, "Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are." No physical temple anymore. Jesus done away with the physical temple. We are the temples of God now. It would be sacrilege for Jesus to change his mind and to bring in a new temple of God here on earth. And in Matthew 23, Jesus said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." So he's saying your house is going to be left to you desolate. That's the temple. And now you'll only see me, because he used to visit them in the temple, but no longer. I'll visit you through people when you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, because we are his temple. Jesus is not going to change that. All right, there will be no temple of God, third temple. That's probably why he's allowed that abomination on the Temple Mount to sit there, to stop another temple from being built. So this is the day we live in, guys. Now is the time that you need to be ready. We are only like 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks, away from a possible great destruction of the Western world. Mystery Babylon being destroyed. So get yourself right. Search your heart. Are you fully clean and ready for Jesus coming? Thank you for listening.